A name that is familiar to all Charlestonians is now the subject of a new play. Here to share more on the world premiere of Septima is playwright Patricia Williams Dockery. Great to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So this play is about Septima Clark.
Yes.
Which is synonymous with Charleston in so many ways. But for anybody who's not familiar with her story, maybe you could describe who she is and why you were inspired to write a play about her life.
Yeah, so Septima is so important to civil rights history and American history overall. Her blueprint is what really catapulted the wins for the Civil Rights Act and for the success of Dr. Martin Luther King and SCLC, and the drive to get Southern blacks registered to vote in the 60s.
And she's also an educator.
Oh my God, yes, an amazing educator who had a transformative pedagogy that she came up with her own, which was to make sure that her students were engaged citizens. And so she really recognized the agency in her students in the learning process as well.
Now you're doing this for Pure Theater, which Pure Theater puts on some wonderful productions. What was it like telling her story as a playwright? What were the things that you wanted to make sure that you highlighted so that audiences really came away with an understanding of who she was?
Sure. I wanted folks to know just how much she meant to Charleston, what her education was like as a person who was just one generation out of slavery.
Yes.
Her father had been born into slavery. Her mother had been a free person of color living in Charleston. So education was very important to them. But I also wanted people to know that Septima was a courageous, a kind, brave revolutionary in many ways. And it was really her ability to connect with diverse people, including Miles Horton of the Highlander School in Tennessee, who was known as the Hillbilly Radical, her ability to impact and influence people like Rosa Parks, but also that she was really one of the most creative and heartfelt teachers, and we would not know about Dr. Martin Luther King in many ways were it not for Septima Clark, because it was her work that really catapulted his work and that of SCLC.
And how much of her story is actually known by the rest of the country? Because certainly it's known amongst Charleston and the Low Country, South Carolina as a whole. Now you're originally from Chicago, and you spent many years here in Charleston and now reside in Maryland. But in doing your research and in your desire to create this play, was she someone that, how did you find her? Yeah,
so two reasons. One, I worked at the Avery Research Center as the executive director. That's what brought me to Charleston, and Septima was a graduate of the Avery Institute. So the Avery Research Center has a part of Septima's collection there. So I learned more about Septima Clark being there in that position that I hadn't known about her, except for a portrait of hers that appears on a book called I Dream a World. So I didn't know, I wasn't taught about her in school. There is one line in the play that says there's so much interest, focus on the king and not on the kingmakers. And Septima's influence has been sort of marginalized in the same way that many other women in the movement and movements period are marginalized.
Well, we always hear about Rosa Parks.
Yes, absolutely.
And there are so many other women, not to diminish or to take away from what she achieved and her boldness, but there are so many women that came from the South, that came from South Carolina, that are now kind of seeing the light of day on a much broader stage.
Sure.
And so when you stage this play, the stories that you pull about her life, are there lighthearted moments? Is it always serious?
No,
how do you mix the two?
Absolutely. It was important for me to make sure that Septima was, as they say in the Gullah, part of the dry long sew, right? So we wanted to capture her relationships with her friends, and so the play is set as if Septima is looking back on her life on what would be her 125th birthday, which would be this year. And so there is this friendship and this ease of conversation with people like Rosa Parks, with Esau Jenkins, with Bernice Robinson, with Miles Horton. And so we see that about her because it's important for people to know that this was a woman who had friends, who was a daughter, who was a mother, and who was a wife. And so we capture all of that in this story.
Wonderful. That's just beautiful. Well, congratulations on this. And it's going to be hitting the stage on March 10th through April 1st at various times, but you can make sure to get your tickets. And it just sounds fascinating and just such a wonderful tribute to her life. I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you to Pure and the
Absolutely.
League of Women Voters for, giving me this honor.
Here, here. We're back after this.